Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Gray Minds Think Alike. Today, we are talking with Linda Parker, the current president and CEO of Women in Distress in Broward County, Florida. Women in Distress is a nonprofit 501c3 and is the only nationally accredited, state-certified, full-service domestic violence center serving in Broward County. We are so excited to speak with you, Linda. I know I've met with you personally regarding my case and Greyson's choice, but I would really love for you to tell our listeners all about Women in Distress and how you started working with them.
Hello, everyone. So I have been with Women in Distress about 4 years. I actually came here. I had been a domestic violence advocate when I was an undergrad in school, but beyond that, the reason I got into domestic violence is because I was a primary and a secondary victim of domestic violence, both as a child and as an adult. It gives you a very different perspective. What I always tell folks is when my mom was being abused, we spent time in a domestic violence center, much smaller than at that time, it was a house in a small town. I remember being there and feeling very much unwanted. It was clear from the way that they handled my mom and I and brother showing up that they didn't really appreciate us being there. I don't know if they believed my mom. I'm not sure what the situation was, but it was extremely uncomfortable. And I was old enough to recognize the sadness and the kind of a hopeless feeling my mom really felt. I think inadvertently and really subconsciously, I took that into the first time that I worked in a domestic violence center and really wanted to make sure that the folks living there understood that this is not how it should be and that this is not a shameful secret you should have to keep. And when my mother-in-law was diagnosed with breast cancer, my husband and I were living in Iowa and I was working in higher education. When we moved down here, I started working for a center located in Polk Hardy Highlands County. I worked there from 2017 till 2020. And then moved here to Broward County in 2020 to become the CEO of WID. WID is a pretty large domestic violence shelter. It's probably one of the largest in the nation. We have 140 beds. We have a pet shelter, a law firm, an outreach center. We do therapy, both kids and individual, family and individual. We don't do couples counseling for obvious reasons, but we do try to be everything that we can be to everyone.
That's great. I actually didn't know you had a legal team there. My next question was going to be, what services do you offer victims?
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Those are all things that everyone can benefit from.
Exactly.
And you've been there how many years?
4 years, 4 years in September.
Now, over the course of the 4 years, what is the most common situation you've seen? Difficult or common? What do you see?
So I think I'd have to split it into two sections. Prior to COVID, what we saw was pretty standard. I hate to use the word standard, but traditional domestic violence, which is you can rely on the escalation going in a certain pattern, right? The movement was started based off of the wheel of domestic violence, which is like
the power
cycle, the power and control wheel. And to some extent that still applies. But I will say COVID broke a lot of what we knew about domestic violence. And it also broke things in a way that we had not seen before and that we had never had to account for. For instance, having to help someone safety plan to stay in an abusive home because there's nowhere to go. we were open, but you're dealing with a pandemic. So you're trying to be as safe as you can be and keep COVID out of the shelter. So services were limited really for a period of time to high lethality cases, which was difficult. It changed the way our hotline had to answer calls. It changed a lot of things. And so what we see now is a very steep increase in high cases. And basically a high lethality case is a case in which statistically, based off of information that we get from the survivor, if there's no intervention given, the likelihood of a death occurring is very high. Things like choking, threatening you while you're pregnant, hurting the family pets, having a weapon in the house, escalating violence. So violence that you can see clearly is escalating, but more so now than ever before, we see people snapping. You may have accounted for the domestic violence to ramp up in this situation and you know what to expect. Unfortunately, sometimes abusers are pretty standard in how they operate, but now we're seeing much more cases where it's weapons of opportunity. So I'm mad at you. I'm going to grab this ashtray and hit you over the head with it, completely unprompted. I've never hit you before. Many more instances of injuries being very high level versus traditional domestic violence, psychological. And I attribute that to a number of things. And this is just my theory. One, I definitely haven't studied it, but one, I think psychologically we're just broken, right? COVID broke a lot of people. I just think there were things that we didn't consider psychologically. I also think that socioeconomically, that stressor is putting itself on people and there's no way to deal with that.
Probably a lot of people just didn't have the finances during COVID and they had nowhere to go. So they just lived in the abuse.
Exactly. One of the things we took away from that situation was we have to really prepare those on the hotline to answer those types of calls. The staff were exceedingly burnt out from having people call them and say, I can't leave right now. What do I do? I'm in my closet. I can't leave. When it became almost more like a 911 kind of hotline than the staff were really anticipating having to answer. And that takes its toll. It takes its toll on people.
And what was their response to these people?
A lot of it was, we've got to get you out of there. If you're in your closet, you can't stay here. We'll find room. We put a lot of people in hotels during that time. If there was a hotel we could find. And we were using the police department to pull people out of homes, essentially, and just say, we've got this, and I need you to go get this person. We have a good relationship with the police department for the most part anyway, but it really encouraged us to collaborate in ways that we probably hadn't before to try to creative ways to get folks out of the house, as opposed to banging down.
Are the police helpful?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We generally, I think everyone's got stories where they had a disconnect with the police department. I can't speak for everyone's experience, but I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times we have a pretty good relationship with the Broward County Sheriff's Office. And a member of their high-level team sits on our board. Anything that happens.
Well, I should have called you when I was looking for Greyson.
That's so true. And your experience, I tell folks, because they asked, and I just tell folks, fundamentally, Ali, they didn't do what they should have done. And it's not okay. I don't want to take away from that. So please don't mistake that.
Oh, no, I'm just saying. That's why I asked, because when I was dealing with the Broward Sheriffs, they literally said, this is a family court issue. We can't step in. So I was just curious if Women in Distress says you need to help them if they act faster.
They're pretty responsive. The other thing is I have to see the opposite side of it. So without bearing my brother too much, he's going through a domestic violence situation right now in another state. The response to him as a male survivor has been abhorrent. And it's only because I don't want to deal with I want to get him through this legal situation before we move forward that I haven't said anything. But when it's all said and done, I'm going to make some phone calls, because I think that if people don't speak up in those moments where the system is broken, then the system stays broken. And there's no one to speak up for the folks who don't know where to turn.
Right. Which is why I'm always so vocal about what happened, because it's the only way to let people know. And maybe the police or whoever can actually learn something. That's what we hope, right? So do you think a lot of the domestic violence situations, women stay because they're just too scared to do something?
I think there's a ton of reasons why women stay. One of the things that abusers are good at are manipulation and almost creating a Stockholm syndrome behavior. So I'm going to do something really bad to you, but then I'm going to love bomb you. And you're going to
Right.
feel like there is a chance, like there's an opening, like you could be a good guy sometime, right? I see
Right.
this behavior, and they don't always recognize that behavior is a part of the abuse. They
Right.
think that this is really, truly this person forgiving or that they really feel bad, when in reality, that's really not the case. They're not in that space to feel bad. They want what they want when they want it. And so it's
It's a
easier.
game.
That's right. And I also think that we don't look enough at long-term abusers and people that consistently abuse multiple parties as having other behaviors that in and of itself are dangerous. We have 4 women here in the shelter with the same abuser. How does
Wow.
that happen? This
I don't
person
know.
has 4 different victims with all these kids, and the women are fighting in the shelter
Right.
about this man. And I'm like, why are you fighting about him? He doesn't care about any of you. So I
Right.
think we as women also have to get to a place where we recognize the things that, and not the things that we do to attract these men, but how do we
Right.
more quickly get out of the relationship once we realize it? Not
Right.
making excuses for the behaviors. Not that's part of it, but most of it is batters they're not stupid people. They're very manipulative. They're narcissistic. Their role is to get you to do what they want you to do, period. And they do that through this repeated cycle. My first job working with batters was in Iowa. And there used to be, and if you think about how ridiculous this is today, but back in the day, women would call a voicemail box. And that's how they would report their abuse is you would call and leave this voicemail in this voicemail box, which if you think about in the middle of a domestic violence situation seems counterintuitive. But one of the things that happened was a young lady that had previously been abused, had tape recorded all of the voicemails that were left from the day of the abuse until the entire cycle. And it started with him saying, I'm very sorry, I love you, I would never do this. But by the end, he's calling her every name in the book and telling her that
Right.
she will drop these charges. And you can almost time it from
Right.
that standpoint. So I think that's part of the reason. The other is socioeconomic. During COVID, we had a lot of situations where survivors that had been long-term gone from abusers had to make the choice, I've lost my job and I can't feed my kids. I'm going back to the abuser. Some of it is having experienced domestic violence or having relationships in your childhood that you saw this behavior being acceptable to you.
I think a lot of women, and also in my instance, I had no idea what coercive control was. And I had no idea that I was being abused. I just thought he was mentally unstable and taking it out on me. And that was just the way it is. And I just had to deal with it. But clearly, I didn't just have to deal with it. There were things that I could have done,
That's right.
but a lot of people just don't know about it.
And people also don't know where to go. And a lot of
Right.
folks are like, I don't want to stay in a shelter. I'm just going to write it out. And I totally get that. And to be honest, I don't blame them. And we serve
Right.
far more people in our outreach than we serve in shelter for that reason. But
Right.
there are other choices other than staying in terms of coming into the shelter, not coming into shelter, and getting assistance.
And that's with people that live together. I didn't live with Grayson's
Exactly.
father, so I didn't really have to go anywhere. I was just stuck.
That's right.
So do you deal with women like that obviously may not need to go to the shelter, but what can you do for them in other ways?
Because of the services we have and because of the law firm and our connection, we can sometimes move someone or use the legal system. I know you tried to do that yourself and go down and try to get stalking, harassment. Had the situation occurred and we knew that person knew that you were at the courthouse, the first response would have been to call the panic button. And I've had situations where we had a survivor calling me, I know he's chasing me, I don't know where to go, and then called the courthouse and said, I need the courthouse police to come outside and escort this person into the courthouse. Those are things that we will do if we know what's going on. And not everyone knows we're here. This is WID's 50th year in Broward, but there's still people that are like, I didn't even know we had a domestic violence shelter in Broward. I didn't know we had a
Right.
domestic violence center. And that's frightening to me because 100% of the women that have died in Broward County since I've been at WID, I always look to see if we ever touched them in our system. And 100% of the time we have never. I'm not saying that we may have been able to do something different. I don't have a
Right.
crystal ball and I have no way of knowing
Sure.
that. But if people know that we're here and we can reach in and help, we will.
I gotcha. And what about if women have lawyers? Do you maybe help work with their team to
We will
understand
do
this type of abuse?
exactly. And we do training we try to do as much training as we can with the criminal justice system and also look at the rates of prosecution, right? As part of what we
Okay.
do here is like the prosecution rates. So the state attorney's office and I just wrote a grant together to increase prosecution rates for survivors. The police departments are also starting to get involved. For instance, Lauderhill is really interested in increasing prosecution rates that don't require victims to testify because that's the biggest hindrance is the fear of
Right.
confronting the
Right.
abuser and what's going to happen once court's over. If he doesn't get
Right.
a long-term sentence, I have to live in fear. They do things like buying a derma scanner, which allows the police to see bruises 3 days earlier than they would normally show up. So they don't have to go back out to the victim's home and take pictures. So it's things like that. We're working with them and that internally we're all working as a system to try to figure out how to really do what we say we're going to do, which is to eliminate domestic violence. We've been
Right.
saying it for all these years. I tell people all the time, I would love to work myself out of a job. I would love to go back and teach. And
Right.
human nature being what it is at this point, until we get a handle on it, that's just not going to happen.
Do you feel like it's getting worse?
I do. I do think it's getting worse. Since COVID, we never went down numbers wise. We took a 25% increase. It's never gone down. And like I said, the increase in weaponizations and lethality and guns, the system all has to decide that it's going to work around women. It's going to have to recognize that this is a consistent community problem and everyone's
Right.
going to have to pour into it. We could have 1,000 WIDs. It's just a patch to fix an issue that is deeply rooted into feminist theory, deeply rooted into how women are treated in general
Right.
in every country. I would say the United States, but it's across the board, and how we have treated women for a very long time.
I was just speaking with a freelance investigative reporter that does cases with family court, and he was saying how these fathers' rights movements strongly believe that women are just complete liars and that there's no way that what they say is the truth. And I feel like a lot of the times judges believe that as well.
I think you're probably right. I was at an event probably 6 months ago, and we were talking about how different pockets of cities, not just in Florida, but across the United States,
Right.
handle domestic violence and really what the different experiences are for women depending on where you live. A person came up to me and said, part of the issue here is that women are weaponizing domestic violence to get custody. I said to that person, that's a very dangerous thing to start replicating out into the public because we already know statistically that women or men or whoever falsely reporting is like 0.05% of the entire populace. So that
Right.
0.05% is not the high end. So when you start talking about it, it's this huge deal that all these women are getting together and trying to keep men from having custody. That minimizes the voice even more. It makes it even less likely that women are to be believed when they do come forward and say something.
Yep, I agree. So this is a twofold question. One, what are some red flags for women? What should they look for? And then maybe some tips or advice for a woman that should leave or do something about their current situation.
I think red flags are things like controlling behaviors. Jealousy is not a cute thing for men to have. And that comes in a variety of ways, right? It can come from tracking your movements, you not being able to go anyplace. It might start off cute at first. Oh, you're going to your mom's again? Oh, those little comments where they're trying to keep you away from family and friends is the first red flag because the best way to abuse you is to isolate you. secondarily financially, right? Your money is your money until it's their money. And you should never, if it's avoidable, put yourself in a situation where you give total control of any of your dollars, but especially someone that you're in a relationship with. The inequality, right? I see inequality in these relationships all the time. So I'm working 70 hours a week and all my money is going to you while you're sitting at home all day. And then when I try to say something, there's this explosive temper or these really rude comments, right? Name calling. There is never a healthy relationship where anyone should ever call you a name, period, full stop. My husband has never said anything remotely rude to me, even in the midst of an argument. That is not normal behavior. Having someone that you can see start to close you in a little bit on your decision making. So taking over your decision making, even small things like where you like to eat. Oh, you don't really like chicken, but you like, it's things like that that you become less about your self decision making and more about their decision making. A lot of times that jealousy, especially in young girls, comes off as being he really loves me because he wants to spend all this time with me and he's just trying to be protective. And that's something we've got to start really talking to our young ladies about very early on, because it's not cute and it leads to stalkerish behavior, which can lead to other things. As it relates to getting help, we're always here, but when you're ready to leave, there's a couple things we recommend. As you're thinking about leaving, we have what we call the go bag, right? If you're living with the person, right? If you're not living with them, this doesn't apply, obviously, but if you're living with the person and you're going to leave, because we live in Florida, it's really easy to tell someone, hey, I saw this thing on TV about a hurricane bag. And so I'm going to pack one just in case something happens. Now is a good time to really do this. I recommend you put your important papers on the bottom, your birth certificate, if you have access to it. Anything you can grab goes on the bottom, and then your clothing goes on the top.
That's smart.
Never put yourself in an unsafe situation. And then when you're ready to leave, don't tell that person you're leaving, because that period of time when you decide that you're leaving is the most dangerous. The time when they think you're getting a restraining order, you're at the courthouse, they're tracking your
Which is
stuff,
what happened
right?
with
Those
me.
are the scariest time, because that's when they feel like the walls are closing in.
And their only act is to retaliate.
Exactly.
Aside from making that go bag, which I love that idea, what else should they start to do? Should they maybe open up a separate bank account? What are some other checklist items for women?
So open up a separate bank account, but I would not recommend moving the money until you're out of the house. Once that person sees the money move or your check doesn't come, it's just another reason for them to get violent. Try to separate as much as you can, but don't pull any triggers until you leave the house. Get everything lined up in order. The other thing that I would recommend is if you have kids, make sure the school knows what's going on. You talk to one person that knows. So that way, when you're ready to go, it's an easy transition.
Right.
When it comes to getting a restraining order, like I said, we have a law firm, so you can always call and get advice. But sometimes a protective order is not protective until you've talked it through with someone.
Okay.
The problem with those are they have to be served before they're in place. So if that person takes off and they can't serve him, you're not protected. So it's important that the timing of that go really well and that you work with someone to get that done in a way that works. Make sure that you have anything that you can possibly think that you would need to get out of the house, but also know that most domestic violence centers can get you access to your paperwork. So like I can get anybody's birth certificate if they come here. So don't put yourself at risk to get things if you need to flee the house.
And now if they do have children or pets, I feel like it's probably a little bit more difficult. How do you prepare your child? Do you sit them down and have a conversation?
It's age dependent, but I would not tell a child until you're gone. We had a case when I was in Iowa where there was a lady who had been fleeing. We had been her sixth domestic violence center. Her husband kept finding her. And we were trying to figure out how he kept finding her. And we finally sat down with her daughter, and her daughter admitted that she'd been calling her dad and telling her dad every time they came to a new spot. The daughter was just trying to be close to her dad, right? She just
Sure.
wanted her dad. She didn't understand the danger she was putting her family in. I recommend if it's young kids that have a cell phone, that you honestly take the cell phone until you're ready for them to have contact, until you're out of the house and safe. Far too many abusers use the kids as a catalyst. As they don't really want to be around the kids, but it's a way to keep them tied to you.
Right. And do you have to deny access to the children? Are they allowed to see?
I think it really depends on a case by case basis, because
Right.
if he has an attorney and his attorney is saying that you're keeping him from the kids and that he has a right to see the children,
Then it's
this was on
alienation.
you and not the children.
Right.
And laws are really dependent. It's not the laws aren't dependent, but some of this is in a gray area. If you file a restraining order, sometimes those come with a parenting plan that automatically gives some type of access, but
Right.
sometimes they do not. And it's best in that situation to follow the legal advice you're given.
Okay. Those are all great tips. I hope women out there listening are able to do what they need to do, and we maybe get enough bravery, because I think that's what it comes down to. They want to leave, but they're so scared. I always feel like that's the saddest part, because fear shouldn't keep you from living your happiest, best life.
A lot of times when women get to us, they've lost their support system because their friends and family have given up on them ever leaving. And so
Right.
my other advice is, if someone who's in a domestic relationship, a domestic violence relationship, I know it's frustrating, but they're going to get there. And when they do, they're going to need you. And
Right.
there's nothing more heartbreaking than having someone tell you, my mom gave up on me years ago and she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Like, that will break your heart. So be a support like you would want support for something that they have no control over.
Yeah. And I think therapy, if they're able, is very important as well. To be able to talk to someone unconditionally is definitely helpful in these types of situations. Do you have therapists at Women in Distress?
We have both family and just adult therapy, and they're trained in a variety of methods to help with crisis and also to help you get through PTSD, because domestic violence
Right.
has a high rate of PTSD. It's similar to be in a war-like situation, because that's essentially what you're in.
Yes, I know it firsthand. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. What types of things is Women in Distress doing this month to advocate for that?
Thursday is our Wear Purple Day, so we encourage everyone to wear purple and upload pictures of your support on social media. I'm speaking on a panel interview with one of our attorneys, the JD Reddick Bar Association, this month. We have a lot of trainings. We go into a lot of schools. We end up doing a lot of mini fundraisers. For instance, the Domestic Violence Task Force and us are partnering on a fundraiser for that group on Sunday. So we really just try to be everywhere this month to really bring attention. But really, we try to be everywhere all the time. But this is just a
Right.
month that it helps remind. And really, we normally do a candlelight vigil to support those who have lost their life to domestic violence.
Gotcha. Yeah, every month is something related. I know November is Family Court Awareness Month. And then the following
Right.
one, I know 1 month is Bereaved Parents Month. So every month I'm trying to honor everyone as best as possible. But it's sad that we need a month to shed light on such injustices.
That's so
I'm just curious. You said you do offer trainings with police and whatnot. Has Grayson's Law ever come up?
We do. Actually, I just had a conversation with someone about Grayson's Law, because we were talking about it internally about what the outcome had been as it relates to the legal system. Someone had said that they really felt like, because it was so new, that the judges were reticent to put it into
Yes.
practice and they weren't sure. Our group that we work with, because WIT is also part of the statewide, so we oversee the statewide services. So we have the hotline and all those things. The statewide hotline comes into WIT, but we also work with another provider that does all the legal services. And so they're offering trainings to the judges and the police departments
Oh, that's
on
great.
Grayson's Law. And then also this last cycle of bills included a bill for the police as it relates to the Petito Foundation, the Petito family. I don't know if you guys
Right.
remember.
Gabby.
Petito was the
Yep.
young lady. So her family and us and some others sponsored some bills this year to increase the lethality assessments that police officers do on the ground. Florida's pretty good in that they already had an assessment for the police on the boots on the ground. When survivors get brought here by police, they always give us the lethality score so we know where the person fits into that cycle.
Right.
But this expands it and includes an additional set of questions. So if this, then that kind of situation
Right.
to catch things much more quickly. So the state is trying to do some things in order to drive down domestic violence. But like I said earlier, it's
Right.
going to take everyone.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if it's ever going to get fully done, because I know even with Greyson's law, it took 2 years. The first year, it had a bunch of language about coercive control and trying to change the definition of what domestic violence is, because they still don't see that as violence. It's not physical. And they made us take it all out. All of that language had to be taken out of Greyson's law. So I know for me personally, there are other things that I want to get amended for Greyson's law, or maybe new bills passed. I'd love to see trainings for judges become mandatory. I know there's Caden's law, which has been passed federally, about another little girl in Pennsylvania who was murdered by her father. And Caden's law now gives training and funding to our state to get that training for judges, lawyers, and gals, and all the proper channels. There's a bunch of other things I'd like to see happen. I'm hopeful that it'll only get better from here.
I am too. I really am. Because you have to have some hope, right? You have to have some belief that at some point it will be different.
And I think the more we talk about it, the more we're calling them out. Hey, judge, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you help this person? Why didn't you help me? Why did you deny my injunction? Why did you deny my ex parte emergency pickup order when it was my day and Greyson was missing for 2 days? He was a missing person. It was still denied. So it's just calling them out. If it keeps happening, hopefully they'll start learning and taking these cases by case situation, and not just blanket everything and saying it's 50-50. That's my hope.
That's what I would say. Voting is important too. We talk a lot
Yes,
about
but a lot of
national-
people have no idea who the judges are when it comes time to vote. We just vote.
That's right. And that's probably something I was guilty of when I was younger, right? I'm just
Yeah,
like,
me
I'm
too.
just gonna go down the line. I do so much research on local government. I do way more research because it tends to be less publicized, the things that are going on in the cases. And it's super
Right.
important that everyone knows the people that you're voting into practice.
Voting for. Is there some sort of cheat sheet that I know when I vote for just the elections, I look at who I should be voting for, what their stance is. Is there something that someone could just quickly pull up for
I'm trying to
judges?
remember. Broward has one. I think it's national, and they drill down to each
County.
Let me see if I can find out what it is, and I'll send it over to you. So that way, if you want to add it, you can.
Okay, I'll add
Yeah,
it
I
to the
did a
show
lot.
notes.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay.
What is the number one thing that you would want to tell our listeners who are too afraid of getting help? What's the one thing that you could say to them?
I would say that there is no shame in leaving, and being scared is one thing, but it could save your life. You can always
your
go back. I
child.
used to say all the time, or your child. I used to tell my kids all the time, I can always undo a no. I may not be able to undo a yes. So make sure
Right.
that when you go into a situation, that worst case scenario, if you leave and you want to go back, you go back. But in the
Right.
situation where you felt unsafe or you think your child is unsafe, go and deal with your feelings about it later, because save yourself now.
And tell me about your upcoming golf fundraiser.
Yes, November 11th, it'll be our 11th year of one of our board members. The Phyllis Thomas Foundation sponsors a golf tournament for us every year. Ali is going to come and be going to speak to us this year. And so I'm very excited. It's actually completely full. We're on a wait list right now for golfers.
That's great.
But it is on our website if anyone wants to see it at widbroward.org or would like to support it in any way financially. This is one of our major fundraisers for the year. We have 3 WIDs. 50th is coming. We've moved our luncheon to a gala. So next year in May 3rd, it'll be in the evening time, a black tie event. We're very excited and grateful and blessed, but also sad that it's been 50 years of fighting the same battle and not getting better. I'm glad that I can be the CEO that ushers WIN to 50.
I am too. And where is your shelter located?
We're
Or
in
I'm not
Deerfield.
allowed to say.
No, we're in Deerfield Beach.
Do you feel it? Okay. And if someone wants to donate, do they just go to the website?
They can go to the website. We have a donation button there. We also have a thrift store that's located in Margate. So if you have things you want to
Oh,
drop off, we'd love to have the thrift store. And that is a Googleable address. You can Google that address and it'll come up and you can drop off stuff. They're open every day but Mondays.
donate clothing as well?
The only thing we don't
Okay,
take are mattresses just for bed bug reasons and used
sure.
car seats because we don't know if they've been in an accident and the car seats get recalled. So we don't accept those just for safety reasons. But other than that, we
Okay.
take everything else. And the survivors in the shelter get to shop at the thrift store for free. So that's the other
Oh,
bonus is that we take a transport twice a week over there and they get to shop for whatever they need. And when they're ready to move out, they can go there and
right.
get furniture for their house. There's also a local nonprofit called Sweet Dreams that gives brand new beds to
Oh, that's
survivors that
great.
are leaving the shelter and moving into their first place. There's a lot of support to be had, and we want to be able to support you where you're at.
How long is someone in the shelter before they leave?
It's an emergency shelter. It used to be right around 6 to 8 weeks. Now we're looking at about 4 to 6 months is about the average
Oh,
stay.
wow.
Yeah, it's increased a lot to do with the housing market here.
And then I'm assuming that everyone in the shelter helps these women get acclimated to move out and get their life back.
If you need daycare for the kiddos, we have one on site, but we also will help you get signed up for whatever needs you have outside of that, get school taken care of for the kids. If your kids need to get caught up on vaccinations or you need to order paperwork, we take care of all that. Financially, we try to help as many folks as we can move into housing, pay first off deposit. A lot of times there's needs for things like storage unit or medical needs, right? We
Right.
have a really great relationship with a private donor who helps pay for things medical related to the domestic violence that may need to get remedied. I need new glasses because they were broken or I
Right.
have a dental issue. So things like that that we can take care of. We do have a little medical clinic here and doctors come in and out. We're really proud of some of the things that we have here. We try to ensure that you start from the
Right.
beginning.
Is there job assistance if they need, or maybe where they were a stay-at-home mom before?
Yeah, we have an economic justice program that works with them on resume building, finding a job,
Oh, that's
financial
great.
assistance. We have some banks that come in and talk to them about how to save money. In some cases, they've never had a job. To your point, they were stay-at-home mom
Right.
because the abuser mandated that they have to stay home. And so now you're trying to start your life over at 40 and you're like, I've never
Right.
even had a job.
Yeah,
So we start from the very beginning.
that's great. Giving women the tools they need to get their life back is all we can ask for. I want to talk about the crisis hotline real quick.
Yep.
It's a 24-hour crisis hotline that provides intervention, advocacy, counseling. Tell us how and when to use that.
So anyone can call for any time. Even if you're not ready to leave and you just want to talk through with someone, you can call either the crisis hotline for Broward or you can call the Florida domestic violence hotline. Either one comes into us. But you
Okay.
get the same support regardless. If you call the statewide, you're more likely to get sent to wherever your center is.
Right.
But the point behind the hotline is it's an entry point into all services here. When you call, they're going to ask you, are you safe? Are you okay with talking to me? We will never, something that people probably don't realize is even if you call me, if you said, my friend Jane Smith is in a domestic violence relationship, here's a number, please call. We won't do that. And it's because we never know where the abuser is in the phone call. If I call you and say I'm from Women in Distress and I understand you're in a domestic violence relationship, I've now put your
Right.
safety at risk.
Okay.
It's important that survivors call us and let us know what it is that you need, and then we can talk through the different levels of help.
And that number is 954-761-1133. And that is the 24-hour crisis hotline for women in distress.
And there's always someone available.
Okay, great. I thank you so much for sharing all of this with our listeners, and I hope to have you back on. And I am looking forward to seeing you at the golf tournament. I thank you for helping me in my situation because you reached out immediately, and I thank you for that.
You're so welcome. And I'm sorry that there was ever a need for me to do that, but I am grateful that you have a voice and that you're a voice for others. Thank you.
No problem. All right, Linda, talk to you soon.
Bye. Bye.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Ali@graysonschoice.org.